Welcome to Still Growing in Grace, a program dedicated to inspiring joy, giving hope, and delighting in grace. I'm Mike Zenker, and I'll be sharing with you a message of hope that will expand your understanding of God's love and amazing grace. God already deeply loves you, totally accepts you, and really, really likes you. Growing in Grace Ministries Canada and Hope Fellowship, your community church, invite you to enjoy today's program as we dig deeper into what it means to be still growing in grace. Starting, the beginning's always awkward. Every person that's going live on Facebook or YouTube, they say, well, I think it's live. I'm not sure it's live. It's funny. All right. Hello, everyone. It looks like we are live everywhere. This is Mike Zenker with Still Growing in Grace, and I'm with David Hayward, known as the Naked Pastor, which is a hilarious, cheeky title. Oh, that was a pun. Sorry. So, David, introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from.
Hi. Yeah. Hi, Mike, and thanks for having me on your show. Hello, everybody out there. Yeah, my name's David Hayward, but most people know me not by David Hayward, but by Naked Pastor, as a cartoonist and a writer and, all kinds of things. I live near St. John, New Brunswick, in a little town called Quispamsis, New Brunswick. And I'm married. We have 3 grown children, and I basically do what I do online. I was a minister. I was a pastor for about 30 years.
Wow.
But I left the ministry in 2010.
So there's hope for me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm
yeah,
30 years this year.
There's always hope. I hung in there for, good 30 years. And then from there, I taught in university for a couple of years. And then I decided to try to make a go of Naked Pastor full time, and it worked. So that's what I'm doing now.
Wow. Yeah, I've been following your art for a while. In fact, did the one you put up today, was that brand new today?
Yeah, I drew that today.
Okay, this is the one right here. So for those that are watching, you can see, I actually want to print this and bring it down to the pet store in my town because they'll love this. We're going to get your name out there, David. That's cool. I love that, What launched your cartoons? Because I think this is going to be a conversation. I have two things I want to hear about today. One, how do we deal with COVID-19 stress and guarding our thoughts and staying positive, especially as believers, whether you call yourself a Christian or not? But this is for all of us in renewing our mind or being focused and intentional and not getting sucked into the negativity. But then your journey of faith, there are others that are walking the same path as you or are wanting to or have questions. And when you hear somebody else being honest about their journey, it gives you permission to ask your own questions.
Yeah, totally.
So what launched all this? Okay,
well, my cartoons, I've been doing cartoons now since about 2005. Now, before then, I've always drawn and I've always painted. I've been an artist for my whole life, as far back as I can remember. My dad was an artist. He painted, and I just, I would draw things all the time. But I started my blog in about 2004 or 5 or something. But one day I decided to, I love a good cartoon. And there was a couple of cartoonists I was following, and I thought, why don't I try to draw a cartoon, I'll try to draw a cartoon every day, see how it goes. I thought I'd last a couple of weeks. Here I am going 15 years later, drawing a cartoon pretty much nearly every day.
Wow.
Unless I don't feel like it, or we're busy, or something comes up, or I can't think of anything.
What do you call it when it's if you can't write, it's a writer's block, but if you're a cartoonist, what's it called?
Artist block, creativity block, whatever. But it happens. And I just found my traffic and audience started to go up after I did cartoons. Like, people were drawn to them. Oops.
That's a pun.
But they just have a way of communicating a lot in just a second or two.
Yep.
By the time, you can see my cartoon in 1 or 2 seconds and the message is delivered, rather than having to read a 1,000-word blog post.
Yep.
And so I just found a really effective way to communicate.
Yeah, you're the shortcut king.
Yeah, it's shortcut. It bypasses the rational intellect. It hits your heart. Goes straight for the jugular. Sometimes it can be offensive or funny or educational or controversial or whatever. And I just found them really, really effective. So I have fun doing it, and I love doing it. But also, I find them just really practically effective at communicating what I want to communicate. So, so I've been doing them now for 15 years.
So I noticed that you seem, if somebody takes a look at your cartoons and misjudges it, the first misjudgment, I think, is that you're taking pot shots at the church or God.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to that? Because I don't think you are, but I can see how people could see that on the front end, especially religious folks would feel offended.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do?
Yeah. So I'm very, I try to be very clear, but it's impossible to say every time I post a cartoon, that like I actually have a lot of appreciation for the church, and the church did a great deal for me. It was an amazing place. That's where I experienced true community at times. I also experienced a lot of hurt, but it was just.
Well, if you're a pastor for 30 years, of course you're going to experience hurt.
Yeah, and I just think the church's greatest asset is its ability to provide community. And when it works, it's awesome. But when it doesn't work, it's terrible.
Yeah.
And so I see very few. It's kind of rare to see really healthy, functional community happening in churches, and it's discouraging to me. I see a lot of power and control and hierarchy and patriarchy and sexism and homophobia and xenophobia, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of fear. And so I criticize what the church's abuse of its identity. So
maybe it's not so much criticizing as it is calling it out.
Calling it out. Yeah.
I think that's better. Like I can hear people say, well, we shouldn't be criticizing, well, hang on. Jesus sure called out stuff. He didn't criticize. He called it out and said, this is not the plan. This is not how you were designed.
I'm not, it's funny, when I was in the church, people would say to me, you shouldn't bite the hand that feeds you. And then now that I've left the church, people are saying you have no right to criticize something you're not a part of.
Wow.
And so, but I was there. I did my best for my whole life. I was a pastor for 30 years, but I also was in the church longer than that. And so I served the church for a long time, and I've seen the inside and the out of what goes on. I've seen the underbelly. I've seen behind the curtain, and I know what goes on there. And when it works and it's powerful. When it doesn't work, it's really destructive and hurts a lot of people. So that's why I, as you say, call out the church and try to challenge it to live up to its calling.
Mm-hmm. What I have enjoyed about your cartoons, especially on Facebook, I have a lot of unchurched friends who believe in God. They just don't believe in the system. Mm-hmm. And so when those cartoons come up, they're calling out what they're seeing. Like you're drawing truth, as in that's the very reason why I don't go to church, or that's the very reason I don't believe in God, because God isn't the issue. It's the misrepresentation of who he is. Mm-hmm. And I personally, I've been on a deconstruction, reconstruction journey for a while. And Brad Jerzak last week used the term, call it a renovation. And so even on the title of today's program, I put in deconstruction, reconstruction, the renovation of our faith. Mm-hmm. Because I know your cartoons are about the whole deconstruction, reconstruction. That's what I'm noticing.
Yeah. So I want to be clear that I want to see the church work.
Yeah. The real church.
When it does live up to its calling, it's powerful. Nothing can beat it. And, there's a lot of crazy, silly, stupid, destructive concepts about God and Christ and the Holy Spirit and, things like that I call out because I think if we continue to challenge ourselves to think outside the box and to grow and to progress in our thinking, to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, then I think we can see powerful things happen in our communities and in the world. But as long as we stay dogmatic and fundamentalist, then it's just going to keep dividing us.
So what would you say is one of the biggest problems in the traditional church that is preventing people from seeing a more hope-filled perspective?
Well, there's a lot, but
yes,
there's a lot, but see, I don't have a problem with churches having buildings or having clergy or raising money or, you know, paying staff or, you know, having worship bands and having smoke and mirrors and
literally
dry ice and lights and all that stuff is, you know, just secondary. For me, the issue is the quality of relationship and not the abuse of power. So this is what I see. Churches don't like chaos. But I've seen that when people are allowed to be free, when they are allowed to be authentic, it creates for powerful growth and powerful community, the quality of community. For me, if a church is struggling with this question, this has always been for me the question: how can I be free without violating your freedom? If a church can struggle with that question, how can we enable people to be free, empower people to be free, while at the same time not violating the freedom of others? If we can figure that out
and be loving about it.
It's same with my wife and I. How can I be totally authentically me without hurting her? And how can she authentically be herself without hurting me? How can we grow into fully independent, quality human beings while staying together in a quality, authentic relationship? And if a church can struggle with that, I think it's on its way to being a really healthy community.
Yeah. My church hasn't arrived. We've been unlearning a lot.
But it's not arriving, though. That's my point. My point is struggling with that issue. If a church is struggling with that issue, no church has arrived. There's no perfect church. There's only perfect moments.
Do you know what my church did when I got my wife found this ad for my job? It said, "Perfect church seeks perfect pastor." That was the title of the ad, ... Just kidding. But on and on it went. Wow. So that's how they launched it. And so anyway, that's funny. That's really funny.
No, there's no perfect church unless they're all perfect. You know, I've been a part, and I know there's some churches out there that really strive to be authentic and create an environment of freedom for its members and for the community. And they're really exciting to be a part of that community. And they do not claim to be perfect. In fact, that would be the death of it. You have to, it's an experiment that you conduct every single day.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Okay, I'm going to run to the initial topic today. Given your background and given your lens of being part of the church world, so you know what they think like, and you're obviously observing what's going on online from people, believers on left and right sides, and extreme left, extreme right. Have you had a chance to talk to people about how to address the negative stress in the media, negative stress with COVID-19, how to approach it, how to de-stress from it? Has that been a conversation with you?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah. Every day.
Okay.
Every day. And the number one thing I tell people is just be gracious with yourself. We're in the middle of a pandemic. So things aren't normal, and don't expect life to be normal. And it's okay to be down and feel unproductive and be unproductive, and to be drained and maybe depressed and worried and anxious. So all those things are natural human responses and coping mechanisms for crises and trauma, which we're in the middle of. Like, we're in the middle of a crisis. We're in the middle of traumatizing events. And, So that's the first thing I tell people is, hey, just be gracious with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Then just focus on the small things. And that's what I try to do, and encourage others to do the same. Don't, I remember at the beginning, people were, I'm going to take this opportunity to write that book I've been wanting to write. It's like they just can't seem to get it done because they're just overwhelmed.
And now they're beating themselves up because they had this goal.
Yep. Double guilt. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I'm just like, hey, like, just relax. And that's one of the things that my wife and I have discovered during this. My wife's a nurse, by the way, and she works in a palliative care facility.
Oh, wow.
And so we're extremely cautious about the whole quarantining and distancing, and wearing a mask and, hand sanitizer, the whole bit. Like, we're very, very, very cautious, and our bubbles are very small. So but one thing that we've learned is, get offline. We live across the road from a river. We go down with our beach chairs and sit on the river, maybe have a glass of wine, watching the boats go by, and just talk or read or nothing, and it's just those little things. We've always been taught you need to be before you do. Well, this is something that we're almost being forced to learn, is just how to be. And for a lot of people, though, there's a lot of guilt and shame associated with it, that they're not accomplishing something or building something or creating something or finishing something. So I just tell people, just relax, just be, and this is a time to be.
Mm-hmm. Do you think this pandemic is bringing to the surface undealt with issues in people's lives? Because now we've been able to distract ourselves from facing any issues by staying busy, and now we're having to almost stop and pause.
Right.
I've heard some people call this pandemic the Great Pause.
Yeah, for sure. I've been writing a lot more in my journal, and which I've done for decades now. And then there's little things that I'll do as well, like get offline. Like I get my news source mostly from Twitter. So and what I consider reputable sources, and I'll just get off Twitter now, and because I noticed a real big change in my mental health after 2016 happened, and since then, and just me being overwhelmed with news and information, and that was very depressing to me, very concerning to me, and I noticed a real big change in my mental health, my emotional health. And so I find, the great pause is just a pause, getting information. Like, there's so much information overload for sure. So I'll just get offline for like many hours, if not half the day, and if I want to find out what's happening in the world, I scroll quickly through Twitter. I find out very quickly what's happening, then I get back off, and I don't inundate my mind with all this information. I just heard, I think this morning, the new count for COVID deaths in the United States alone is 185,000 people. That's a lot of people who have died around us. I'm in Canada, you're in Canada, but my wife's American. We have a lot of friends in the States, and a lot of my followers are in the States. That's traumatizing, to lose. I think soon it's going to be 250,000. If it's not already, we don't even know the real figures. And that should be traumatizing to any normal person. And, so we're in the middle of a huge crisis, and to be experiencing trauma is to be understood and normal.
I think Paul Young, 2 weeks ago, he was saying that 6 of his wife's side of the family members have COVID and are quite sick.
Yeah.
And just having a really hard time. Like, this is a real thing. It's not a fake news. It's not a fake virus.
No, I have friends in the States, and every I think everyone I know knows somebody in their family or close to them who have COVID or have died of COVID already. So
Yeah.
it's a big deal. Now, I have a lot of family in the States as well, and it's very scary. And there was a lot of stress connected with that too, like with my wife, and just us being super careful. The last thing she would want to do is carry COVID into the palliative care facility.
Yes.
And it's just a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress associated with it. So, we just practice the very, very simple things, like just being still, just not feeling the pressure to do anything, and just understanding ourselves and being gracious with ourselves. I think that goes a long way. And then not to feel ashamed about it,
Mm-hmm. Especially those who are busy, you feel bad for taking a rest, because you're used to always go.
Right.
know?
Right.
But I like the advice of removing yourself from, disconnect from media, internet, and just have quiet time. I was on a boat last night for the first time in a number of years. Somebody took me on their motorboat and went fishing.
Nice.
I was like, I didn't know I needed that.
Yeah.
And so when I was done, it's like, dang, I need to do this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because I'm so trying to react to all the stuff that's going on. And with my world, I've got, a couple jobs trying to make sure I make ends meet. Is my job going to last? Oh no. So I have all these fears playing out in my head, and I play this game, and I'm preaching through a series on how to walk through the stress. And I got to listen to my own messages, the be still was a big one. Be loved was a big one. Beloved is really be loved. Do you know you're loved? Do you know your identity? Rest in that peace. And this is a great time to ponder somebody loving and doling on you, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's been a wild time for sure. And then trying to strategize, our church is looking at reopening in-person services in late September. And what does that mean? Well, there's a whole new level of stress and work connected to that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's unique. And I think
very extreme and unusual times.
Yeah. And with my leadership team and people in my church, we've got opinions that vary from all over. Well, you know what? Everybody's overblowing this, or we don't have to wear masks, or all these different expressions. And what I've had to learn is have everyone at least acknowledge that there are other perspectives that we may totally disagree with, but obviously look at that one person. Are they intelligent? Do you trust them? Yes. But they hold a different belief. Okay. Then don't get mad at them. This is about relationship. You're talking about healthy communities. I think the more conversations of giving permission for varied beliefs allows for better relationships, because then you have greater discussions without having to be right. Because I have a hunch. Churchianity is more about being more right than other people than it is even about Christ. And that's scary.
Yeah, so I have an online community called The Lasting Supper that I launched in 2012 for people who are deconstructing. And it's come in very handy during this COVID crisis when, a lot of them have already left the church, but some hadn't. And now, it's an online community. So there's a couple of hundred members there. And we just have a value system in place that people, we encourage them to catch on to as quickly as possible. There's a great wide diversity of people there, anything from church-going believers to atheists, who used to be believers and now are atheists and left the church and will never go back, etc.
Yep.
And everybody in between. And it's a wonderful, dynamic, energetic, loving community, supportive. But it's only because we respect one another and we refuse to argue.
Love it.
So, and one of the analogies I use to help people try to understand how we do things is the Potluck Supper, which most churches know about, where you bring something to the potluck and you put it on the long table or whatever. And when you go up to fill your plate, you move along. If you see something you like, you put it on your plate. If you see something you like, you don't put it on your plate, but you don't say anything about it.
Ew, who made this? This is disgusting.
whether I'm gluten intolerant or whatever. You just keep moving. You don't say anything. You don't like it, you don't take it. If
That's
you can't
a really
eat,
good analogy.
you don't put it on your plate. If you do like it, you put it on your plate. No comment, right? And if you take something and nobody eats it, you don't say, "Why didn't anybody eat my stuff? You ungrateful bunch," whatever. You just quietly take your dish home and say, "I won't take that again."
Yes.
And so that's the way we treat it at the Lasting Supper. Is if somebody says something you don't agree with, just move on. Don't start a fight.
Yeah.
And you just say, "Well, that's their opinion. It's not mine, but I'm not going to, this isn't the place to debate. This isn't a place to argue, because I've learned debate and argument are absolutely useless, a complete waste of time. And if we want to enjoy the quality of community, if you want to debate politics or health measures or theology, there are places for that.
Yep.
But not here. Here we're learning how to vent honestly what we're going through in our deconstruction and listen without judgment. And that's it.
So deconstruction, how would you define that? Because that's the other topic I wanted to get into, because that one's dear to me. How would you, what is deconstruction for somebody that's not heard the term, or what's a healthy way to understand that?
Deconstruction, well, I need to look back on my records, but I think I'm the first one who used that in reference to changing your beliefs. Okay. It's originally a term, a philosophical term. Derrida is the one who invented the term deconstruction. But I took the term because I was studying it at the time. I thought, this sounds like, a good way to explain when our beliefs crumble and erode and fall apart. And
it usually comes to crisis, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a crisis. Absolutely. And so I called it deconstruction, where instead of building up, it's unbuilt and things fall apart. And so that's what I call deconstruction, is when your beliefs change. Yep. And I mean, in a kind of radical way. And when they start to erode and slip away and lose meaning for you. For most people, if not all, that's a very traumatizing experience.
Okay, so trigger. I've been discussing deconstruction with a lot of people for the last couple of years now. And this COVID crisis, you add the anxiety of deconstructing some pretty big pillars of faith in your life. Now you got this COVID crisis and all this extra crisis hitting you. I think those that are in a deconstruction journey are even more anxious or traumatized because of all this, because now they're seeing that everything can be questioned. Now they're questioning the news. Like, this is a very vicious spin cycle in my mind.
Well, the common thing between those two, though, is the necessity to think for ourselves rather than believing what we've been conditioned to believe, or believing whatever we're told. Yep. So we need to learn how to be discerning. I think that's the one gift of the Spirit that is completely lacking.
But I want the other gifts. I want the more exciting ones.
Discernment, man. I mean, where is it? Discernment. So I think that's what the common thread is, the necessity to become discerning and learn to think for yourself. So, I know I was conditioned in what to believe in growing up.
We all were.
And yeah, no matter who you are, no matter what religion or non-religion, even atheist friends I know know atheists who are deconstructing from their atheism upbringing in order to become more spiritually aware. So it goes both ways. So it's basically a unconditioning, deconditioning of your belief system.
That's good, but that's not the goal. Is to just strip it down, right? Like I hear people are afraid of deconstruction because it lends to the idea that it means nothing is left when you're done. You're destroying. It's like you're deconstructing a cabin to nothing, so there's nothing left. But that's not the point of deconstruction, is it?
Well, This is where I part company with a lot of people.
Okay.
Because I actually don't encourage reconstruction.
Okay.
So
help me understand, because
okay,
I know what you mean, but I really want to hear your heart on this, because my world, the people that I'm connected to, this conversation is going to be really important.
Yeah. So I'm in a house here I bought, and it was basically, because we're on a river, it used to be an old cottage, and it was all chopped up into little rooms. I love open concept. So what I did was I took all the walls down, put up posts and beams, and opened it all up.
Wow.
And so it's open concept now. The kitchen, living room, dining room is all one big happy space. And I like space. And I like openness. And I like that freedom. So when we're deconstructing our conditioning, what we've been conditioned to believe, why the anxiety about replacing something that was, I don't like to use the word false, because that means that it was all a lie. I don't mean it was all a lie. It means it just means it doesn't work anymore. Why that anxiety to build something back up again? So I encourage people not to rebuild something at least right away. Like, I know a lot of people, they experience a lot of anxiety around their reconstruction. They're no longer believing in the same things, and they immediately jump into yoga, Buddhism, atheism, crystals, new age stuff, whatever, because they need a container. They feel they need some kind of label to describe where they're at. I'm anti-label. I don't believe in wearing labels. Sometimes they're handy, sometimes they're useful, sometimes they're practical, but I don't need the label. You need the label to understand. You think you need the label. I need the label on myself so you can read what my contents are. I don't need that label.
But true relationship doesn't require label.
No, that's true.
Nobody wants to take the time for a relationship. They want the label so they can read your mind and judge you instantly.
So my point about not reconstructing is clearing out all. It's like weeding a garden. I use this analogy too. It's like preparing a garden. Let's say you have a tomato plant and you plant the seed. You clear the stones, you clear the stump, you break up the ground, you add in mulch, or you add in, not mulch, compost, fertilizer, you plant the seed, you water, you wait. You keep weeding, keep it clear, try to keep the birds away, try to keep the deer away, try to keep the rabbits away. Hopefully it gets sun, you keep nourishing it, and eventually the tomato will grow. It's the same with deconstruction. Like 99% of the work is just getting stuff out of the way. And then once all the stuff's out of the way, the stones, the stumps, the weeds, the birds, the deer, the rabbit, all this stuff, it'll grow. Mm-hmm. Who you are to be will grow naturally without force. And so that's what I encourage. It's just
let God grow you.
Let it all go. Let it all go.
Yeah.
And
that's like a Disney song, isn't it? Sorry. Sorry.
So, it's kind of, I think it's Frozen.
It is. Let it go. Let it go. Yeah.
Well, let it go. Like my daughter always says, like a balloon, let it go.
As a pastor, that was really hard for me. In fact, I was telling you just briefly before we began, but about 20 years ago, I started discovering my identity in Christ, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And number one, I didn't know I was actually forgiven. I thought I had to beg for my forgiveness, and it was up to me to stay forgiven up, by how I repented and prayed. And I'm a senior pastor of a church, and I'm just chorusing what everybody else is saying too. But when I discovered I was completely forgiven, a weird sense of freedom hit that I could never have experienced. Mm-hmm. And I didn't try to figure it out anymore. I didn't try to fit the other stuff into my box, but I did as a pastor, because pastors have to be prepared to give an answer because that's our job. I had to understand all these other categories, and I went searching like crazy, trying to figure out who God is better. And God kind of stopped me 6 months later and said, "So how's it going?" How you doing on your own there, eh? You know, you're coming up with some good answers, aren't you? No, I'm not. Well, stop trying. Let me reveal as the time goes. Don't try to help me out. I don't need your help. And I hear that from your plant idea of just be who you are. You know, the idea of letting go of all these beliefs. If it's true, it's going to stick. If it's not true, it'll fizzle away. And we got to be okay with that. That's scary.
So it's a mystical kind of approach to
I like that word.
Where you're rather than living through the filter of your beliefs, receiving experience through the filter of belief. Is this wrong? Is this right? Is this pure? Is this impure? Is this secular? Is this sacred? Is this holy? Is this unholy? You know, instead of all that, and also instead of relating to the world through the filter of beliefs, who can I love? Who should I not love? Who should I reject? Who should I allow in the church? Who should we not allow in the church? Who is pure? Who is, you know, all this stuff. We live directly, immediately, with love. And then you realize that beliefs play an entirely different role when you live directly. It's kind of like in a loving relationship, like with Lisa and I. I don't need information. I don't need data. I don't need beliefs about her in order to enjoy her, or for her to enjoy me. It's immediate. That love that we share is immediate. The experience is immediate without the filter of words and language and everything, right? So that, and the same goes with our spiritual lives. I think we can live that authentically, that directly, with that immediacy and spontaneity. And so letting all these beliefs go, it's a mystical kind of approach to life, and it's scary at first, but once you get the hang of it, then there's nothing more beautiful.
But what I've noticed, and I love that, out in the East, the Eastern world, they're used to mystical. That's normal. The Eastern church is more mystical than the Western. Western church, Western thinking seems to be locked up into cubbyholes and boxes of clear, concise, here's the doctrine, there we go. Don't mess with that box. And if you have the box, you don't have to think. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to respond, because I've got my box and the box tells me what to believe. So there isn't really faith required. Has that concept hit you ever, or have you looked into Eastern Western dualism?
Yeah, like I've done a lot of reading in Eastern stuff, and they have their issues. Like any philosophy, any religion, any approach to life has issues. That's why I call these things all experiments or suggestions, or it's like the scientific community. We were talking about quantum physics earlier. You mentioned somebody who's into quantum physics. I love reading physics. I can't believe I am saying that, because I sucked in science and math and so on. But the quantum physics world is fascinating. And in the world of science, they have a sort of a code of ethic that says everything must be falsifiable. In other words, whatever statement we make, we need to accept the fact that it could be wrong. Everything's falsifiable. Everything's falsifiable. And otherwise, research stops. And we see that happening in the theological world. In the spiritual world. If we make a statement, it's not falsifiable. It's absolutely true.
Because God told you, right?
Stops. Yeah. Investigation stops. Study stops. Research stops. Changing our mind stops. Change stops. So that's why I think everything needs to be handled with open hands.
I love that. I was listening to a medical doctor who was teaching. His name is Bruce Walkup. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's from Australia. He's connected to Baxter Kruger. Have you heard of Baxter?
Yes.
Yeah. So this is one of his Australian guys, and he was teaching and talking about how the early church had, there was two categories. The Eastern church had one long strain, and they didn't divorce science, but the early church, the ones that came to Constantine and what he did, and Augustine came in and blah blah blah, that whole Western mindset created a sense of dualism and separation theology came in like you wouldn't believe. They divorced science. And by the time I got done realizing how I have been conditioned by my world, in my country, in my Western thinking, I knew what I was learning about God being better than I thought, the angry God concept. I was wrestling with that. I knew what I was hearing from certain people was true, but why was I having a hard time? When I listened to Bruce teach that, it's a series on YouTube called What is the Gospel? And I realized that I thought there was a wall in front of me stopping me from seeing something really important. Until I realized there wasn't a wall in front of me. I was in the wall, the Western wall of conditioned thinking that did not allow me to see another perspective. And when I realized that, I wept. I realized, oh my goodness, I have so much more to learn. My tight-fisted theology is now open-handed. Father, put in whatever needs to go in, take out whatever. You know, it's out of my control. What else am I going to learn? And it's going to be scary because I'm going to start to believe things I didn't think were true, and vice versa. So it's really scary just giving in and letting the Holy Spirit be your teacher instead of man.
Well, it's like Galileo, right? Who his scientific discoveries were challenging the theology of the church, and were rejected because because Galileo was decentralizing the earth and man, generic man. And it was just too upsetting for the church to accept. And that's still happening today all the time. Copernicus and so on, the Copernican revolution, it's always happening where we refuse to change our minds because it decentralizes something that is central to us. So, and there's something I tried to do when I was a preacher, was preach open-handedly. So that doesn't mean like I preach away and then at the end I say, or whatever. It's not like that. It's more like, here's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm sensing.
You're inviting them into your thoughts.
Right. And I would literally be on the same level with them and say, what are you guys thinking? What are your thoughts? It was very back and forth discussion, question and answer, because I didn't want to be their guru. And I knew that we were on a journey together to understand. And so if we were truly an authentic community, we all contribute to our health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that. Wow. So deconstruction. Where have you seen the greatest categories of deconstruction where people are saying, hey, this is where I'm having a hard time? And I'll lead in with this. A number of years ago, I think it was 5 years ago, I heard Paul Young at a conference. Him and Baxter were there, and they had the stool in the middle of the stage. And the one side, there was 3 chairs, Trinity, and then they had the singular angry God over on the other side. But the stool was in the middle. And Paul made a funny joke. He said, atheists is where the stool is. And the stool is probably the best place for atheists, because the angry God, people are moving away from that angry God and don't believe in that God. Well, we don't believe in that God anymore either. We're on the journey. Atheism is actually one of the best bridges to being ready for a better, wider truth. And so it's funny how you call it a stool sample, because you're moving away from the crap. Yeah. And I thought that was very interesting. And that's kind of where I'm seeing things. But where are you seeing people running towards deconstruction? What kind of topics?
Yeah, no, I don't see anybody running towards deconstruction. I see most people, nobody wants to deconstruct. In my opinion, my observation, it happens to you. Now, obviously, you've somehow prepared for it, because we're not victims here. I think deconstruction is actually growth. We used to call it backsliding or doubting God or betraying Christ or whatever. Now we call it growth. It's growth.
I love that.
The church is awesome at helping us grow up into about adolescence. But then when we start to rebel and question authority, that's when the church drops the ball, because it doesn't want that. And then that's when we either stop questioning, or the only way we can continue to question is by leaving. So I see two kinds of deconstruction. One is theological and the other is ecclesiological. Some people deconstruct from the church. They've become disillusioned with the church, with its leadership, with its control, with its greed, with its exclusion of certain people, with its abuse, and they leave the church, but they may not deconstruct theologically at all. Now, if somebody deconstructs theologically, they most often deconstruct ecclesiologically as well.
Yeah.
So I see both of those movements happening. The people I'm most concerned about are people who are deconstructing theologically, because that's very, very traumatizing, and there's no help out there.
So your group is a safe group for people that are on that journey of deconstruction. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that open for others to join in?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. TheLastingSupper.com is where it's at.
Okay.
It's $15 a month, because it takes a lot of time and work to run the thing. Plus, it's kind of a barrier of entry. It's very safe from trolls and people who just want to stir up trouble. And so it's, and people are very grateful to be able to pay that for that safe space. So, but yeah, so deconstruction theologically, anything's up for grabs, or everything's up for grabs. You can't say, I'm deconstructing now, but I will never give up on my Jesus, and I will never give up on God. Well, no, sorry. It's the whole meal deal. Everything's gonna, when you start deconstruction, everything's gonna come to question. I'm not saying you're gonna become an atheist or an agnostic. You might become an even better believer one day. Who knows? You cannot predict where you're gonna end up. Fasten your seatbelt.
That's control otherwise, right?
Try to enjoy the ride, and wherever you end up, you'll be glad you're there.
I had a really good buddy of mine. I met him about 7 or 8 years ago, and when I met him, he walked in my office and he said, "I'm just here to shoot the shit about Jesus with you. That's it." And he described his crisis of his own life. He said, "I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't believe any of this stuff anymore." And then he said, but then something hit me. Jesus, that's it. It's all I can believe. Nothing else. Everything else is up for grabs now. And he didn't even know what Jesus meant at that time. He didn't want to just stick with his traditional upbringing. But the journey of coming to the place of just open, that just changed that guy. And I've never seen anybody with a more authentic faith. Like incredible. He taught me a lot. It was really quite powerful. So, oh man. Yeah, he's a good guy. And I think when you have those kinds of relationships where you can be honest and talk through faith without sounding religious, that's why the free language is swearing. I'm not into the overt swear just to shock people, but it's not about the language. This is about real authentic conversation,
I talk with people every day. This is what I do. I help people deconstruct, I make this absolutely clear. I'm not trying to lead you anywhere. What I'm trying to do is allow you to empower yourself to become self-directing, to become spiritually independent, I call it. People, when I started using that word spiritually independent, they're like, we're not supposed to be independent. We're supposed to be in fellowship with one another. I'm saying, no, there's a difference between being isolated and being independent.
Yep.
I'm an independent. Hopefully, I've grown up to be an independent human being. Hopefully, Lisa's grown up to be an independent human being, and we choose to become interdependent.
That's more beautiful, right there.
If I'm not independent, but I'm codependent, that creates a toxic kind of a relationship. So
didn't Stephen Covey talk about that too? in a couple of his books, in his leadership books, on it's not about independence. We think independence is the goal. And we think dependence is subversive and low on the totem pole, but interdependence is life.
But it requires independence on the part of each person. I choose to be interdependent. If I'm in a toxic relationship where I feel needy and the other person's needy, and it's this kind of codependent dependency kind of thing, it's very sick and unhealthy and prevents growth. So, you know, I just encourage people, you need to start trusting yourself. And yes, you can have mentors, you can have guides, you can have spiritual directors, you can have pastors and so on, but you just don't, you're not like a baby bird in a nest just taking whatever they shove down your throat.
Yeah.
You discern, is this good for me? Is this bad for me? It's like a diet. You learn what's good for you, what's bad for you, or exercise. And it's the same with your spiritual life. It's like Nelson Mandela, right? I am the master of my destiny, the captain of my ship, kind of thing. And it's the same for each one of us spiritually.
One of the cartoons that I think seems to sell the most of your stuff, or your clothes that you sell, whatever, the hats, the shirts, is the one with questions are greater than the answer. Is that?
Oh, yeah.
Is that one of the top ones?
Yeah, it's one of my most popular ones. Yeah. Okay. Question mark, greater than sign, and exclamation mark.
All right, explain that, because that seems to describe you and what you're doing in all the philosophy of your cartoons. Help me understand that one.
Yeah, questions are greater than answers. In fact, I have a whole book titled Questions Are the Answer.
Oh, good. How many books have you written then?
9.
Okay. I'll give you give you a moment at the end to tell me about your books, but tell me about.
I will. Okay. So questions are the answer. If you feel you have the answer, you're locked. You're locked in. You're done. But if you are open to the questions and mystery and you're curious, that's where growth happens. That's where you expand. So that's why I claim questions are greater than answers. And, you know, if you look at the gospel stories, Jesus was a master questioner. He knew how to ask questions. And even when he was asked a question, he'd answer with a question. So it's like, if we can open up our minds to accept questions as a way to wisdom, I think we're well on our way to growth. Yeah,
that's cool. I found the cover. So there's the book cover.
And there, look, Brad Jerzak gives me a recommendation at the bottom.
Oh, cool.
Gary Larson meets Jeremiah. Gary Larson is the Far Side comic guy.
Yeah, I love the Far Side.
So my latest book is Till Doubt Do Us Part. When Changing Beliefs Change Your Marriage.
Ooh.
And
what if you're not married? Can you still order it?
Absolutely. If you're dating, or this even applies to family relationships. If
what's it called? When Doubts?
Till Doubt Do Us Part. TIL.
Yep.
DOUBT.
Till Doubt Do. Okay, keep going. Tell us about that book.
Yeah. So it's Lisa and I, when we went through deconstruction, our marriage went through a real major strain, and we made it. A lot of marriages don't make it. So when beliefs change in your marriage, either yours or your spouse's or both, often it causes a lot of tension in the relationship, and many marriages blow up. So I wrote this book to help people find ways to maybe stay together, or if they feel they need to go separate ways, to do it in a healthy way. And so that's why I wrote the book. And there's, I don't know, something like 30 chapters and a whack of cartoons in there. And it's on Amazon and Kindle. So
I just posted the picture here. So
looks good.
Dope. Yep.
I love the cover, eh?
That's really cool.
And the question mark.
Oh, again. Oh, that's good. I never caught that. Sorry. That's cool. So that's not just for married folks. This can be for those that are also questioning doubt, have doubts, right?
That's right.
or is it primarily for relationships? Because people are going to wonder.
Well, no, it's primarily for relationships. Now, I have other books, like I mentioned. I have another book, The Lasting Supper, Letters for Deconstruction, which is all about deconstruction, and questions are the answer. That's another book that would be helpful, especially maybe for people who are deconstructing and asking questions, but also for pastors, because it's basically my story about being in the ministry and then leaving the ministry and all that. So.
Okay. So you grew up where? Newmarket area, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, not far from you. Yeah, that's right.
And then now you're living where?
Quispamsis, New Brunswick, just outside of St. John.
Okay. Very cool. So it's like 11 o'clock where you are almost, right?
That's right.
All right.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, we're going to wrap this up. I want to thank you for this time. This was really fun. A fellow Canadian. And this topic is huge. And there's a lot of people hungry to learn more. They don't know where a safe place is to deconstruct. They know they want to question things, but you can't in the church system. So I think this is exciting. And the more they're exposed to good people like you, I think let's keep this going. So.
Yeah. So to your listeners out there or watchers, if you go to nakedpastor.com, you can sign up for my email, but I'm really good at responding. If you message me on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, I'm really good at answering. So if you have any questions or anything you'd like to ask me or talk about, just reach out to me. I'm really good at getting back to you.
That's awesome. All right. I'm going to sign off, but I'll talk to you for just a moment as soon as I turn off the off part here. And thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation with David. And go to his Facebook page, look at the cartoons, his nakedpastor.com, I think it is, or is it ca.com? There's a lot of great stuff there, and it'll get you thinking. It'll make you laugh, which is great therapy right now during COVID. But just go take a look at that. Thanks again, David. And we're going to sign off officially by clicking this off button.
Join me next time on Still Growing in Grace for more good news. Enjoy previous episodes by downloading our podcast at growingingrace.ca. You can also visit hopefellowshipycc.com to find our service times and location. If this show has been an encouragement to you, please consider making a donation today at growingingrace.ca and help us keep spreading this good news. Thank you again for tuning in to Still Growing in Grace.